In Africa and in fact the world, the barriers that stand between women and their potential are many. And while it's true that conditions have improved over the years and advancement has been made, the situation is still challenging for many. Women continue to be disadvantaged in education, in training, in health, and they are more vulnerable to violence, including sexual violence. The roadmap to progress and achievement exists. It's just locked away in the lives and stories of those who have achieved against all odds. In our Women in Business segment, we speak to women who are powering through, leading and succeeding in their chosen fields of endeavor. My guest today is Odun Eweniyi. She's the co-founder and chief operating officer of Piggyvest. She's also the co-founder and general partner at First Check Africa. Odun, welcome to Business Edge. It's fantastic to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. Morning.
So you're not only a woman in tech, but you're also a co-founder, a woman founder in technology, in this tech space. So just quickly take us through, how did you find yourself here? How did this happen?
It was entirely unplanned. I just graduated from university. I actually attended Cofounder University. And 2 weeks after my graduation, I had come to Lagos to interview for a job opportunity. And I met up with two of my friends who are actually my current co-founders today. They were running a startup and they asked that I join them, and that's kind of how my journey into tech started.
So as a female co-founder, it hurts me to say in a way you're in a rare position. Even though it's not fully rare, we do see a lot of tech companies co-founded by women, but it's still something that is not as prevalent as we'd like it to be. And we see many fintechs around the world that can't possibly boast of some of the representation that Piggyvest actually has. So in terms of occupying this position as a woman, the co-founder, the also holding the position as chief operating officer, has this come with any challenges?
I mean, of course, the challenges kind of reduce as the company grows and as time passes, but in the early days, we had not just the usual growing pains that an early stage fintech company would have, but we also had the added layer of having a woman interact with our co-founding team. So, it made everything just a little bit harder. The sexism was obviously there, and then, the journey to fundraising was slightly tougher since I occupied the COO position and I was also the one who did the fundraising for us. So we actually started our fundraising, I think, in the middle of 2017, and we didn't close it until the middle of 2018. So it took a full year for us to raise our seed round. And honestly, being Black in tech, being a woman in tech, having to navigate just all of those pitfalls of working in technology, which at that time in 2017, 2018, was still more male-dominated than it was now. It was definitely very, very interesting, to say the least. But today, I'd have to say that improvements have been made. As you yourself noted, it's no longer as rare to find a female co-founder. And just in that vein, it's no longer as rare to hear women raising more than $1 million for their seed rounds. In fact, last year, we had a 17% increase in the number of women who raised more than $1 million in their seed round, as an increase between in 2021 over 2010 to 2020. And in that regard as well, we've also had like a 4 times increase in the number and the value of deals being raised by female founders. So we're not where we need to be, and it's definitely been challenging, but we're making a lot of progress.
So I like that you say we're not where we need to be, but we're making that progress, and we see the visible progress. So let me ask this. There's a lot of talk about representation. There's a lot of talk about improving the current state of affairs, and there's a lot of talk about allies. In terms of this progress that's being made and men, how do men become good allies? How do men become allies for women in technology, for women in the fintech space, advocating to make sure that the space is as open for all as possible?
Look, I think a lot of these things is, first of all, acknowledging like your innate biases, right? And I don't, when you talk about, biases in tech, biases in fundraising, a lot of people instinctively think that you're blaming them, but we're not, right? People will naturally invest in people that look like them. You take a bet on people that look like you. And so just, first of all, understanding that that's the baseline for which we as humans make these decisions is very helpful as we kind of like now try to make space for women. So how do men become allies? I'll give the example of my 2 co-founders, Somto and Josh, who've been very instrumental and super supportive in kind of me occupying space within our company and within the tech space. Another great example is Mr. Olumide Shoyombo, who is actually the first investor that wrote us our own 25K check into our first company in 2014. Without someone like him taking that chance, giving us that belief capital, I don't think we would be here today. And so there is many other examples like that, people who speak for women when we aren't in the room. And finally, a good way to make sure that representation is actually being achieved is to get more female VCs in the room. How do we get more female VCs? LPs who make investment into funds need to also fund female VCs. Like one of the things that we do at First Check is invest in a startup, a tech startup with at least one female co-founder. That for us makes sure that diversity is in the mix when we're making these investment decisions. We are uniquely positioned as two female GPs to be able to make sure that whatever companies that we're investing in, we're not sacrificing returns for diversity, but we're also not sacrificing diversity and the presence of females in the decision, the decision room for returns. You can have both. And acknowledging our biases, understanding that investing in women is not a charity, it's obviously and absolutely an economically driven decision. You can make returns from female-run companies. In fact, there's data and statistics that will tell you that female-led companies outperform. Female Founders Fund, when they released their own performance data for their portfolio companies, said that 63% of their companies, of their female-led companies, outperformed female-led companies outperformed the male-led companies by 63%. And that's just like a little of what can be done when we're holding space for women and holding space for diversity. And it doesn't really have to be about you shortchanging one for the other. It's kind of how do men be better allies? Give better chances, give us equitable chances, understand that women need as much belief capital as men do, and we're starting companies just at the same rate.
And if you had not kicked in that statistics, I was definitely going to add it as well in terms of women at the end of the day giving better returns in the long run. But I also have to ask this. Sometimes people make it a competition or a complementary conversation. And being a woman who's been in this space, do you think there's something that women bring to technology, more specifically the fintech sector, that can help the sector become more successful and impactful, particularly when you look at financial inclusion, financial literacy, and even women becoming more financially empowered here on the continent?
Look, I think just generally we bring balance, right? It doesn't make logical sense that women will represent 50% of the population, but less of the decision-making process in any sector. That's one. The second thing is when you're building a product for the mass market, having one voice be silent is generally bad. As you can see from products in the West that have failed, when you target the product at women, you can tell when there are no women in the room. So naturally, when you have a balance of opinions, equal representation for men and equal representation for women, you immediately have more empathy in that product, more balance in that product, and people can perceive it. We can tell design thinking, the empathetic way that the product presents itself, and also knowledge and skills. Right, it's great to talk about how women are great for empathy and all of that, but women are smart, right? Women that are starting companies are operating at the same level as men. I have a first-class degree in computer engineering. I don't doubt the qualifications of other men starting companies, but I would like for the qualifications of women starting companies not to be in question either. The only reason to fund women or to let women start companies is simply because we want to, because no one ever asks, what do men bring to the table? Right, we just are. We want to start a company, we should be able to. We want to run a business, we should be able to. I want to raise a seed round. You should judge me on the strength of my ideas and the strength of my dreams and my vision and how I plan to execute it and not my gender.
All right. Although I don't have time, but I have to ask this final question. Just sneaking is in there for you. What's the biggest lesson you've learned on this journey that you think you sharing it will help somebody shortcut their way around also, just jump-starting, getting themselves, particularly a young African woman, started in the fintech or the technology space?
I always, when I'm asked this question, I always borrow from my dad. When I was starting my journey in tech, it was difficult at the beginning, and I went to him. And my dad told me that I first of all needed to understand, and ask myself the difficult questions. Why am I doing this? Where do I want to go? And what do I want to achieve? I believe that for everyone who's starting out as a woman, simply because you're acutely aware of how much stands between you and your goals, you need to answer those questions for yourself. So every time there is a stumbling block, every time there is sexism thrown in your face, every time your journey is ever so slightly longer than that of your male counterparts, you look at those questions that you've answered immediately and you're able to just keep going. Because I'm not going to lie, the journey is really difficult and it's long. I'm like 9 years into tech and 6 years into building Piggyvest, and it's still very important for me to go back inside and ask myself why I'm doing this. And because my answer continues to endure, I continue to be motivated. And I think that's kind of how most people can get over the hurdle of starting and then continue.
All right, so Odun Eweniyi, thank you so much. It's a short conversation, but I know we'll have you back on some more issues around the fintech space and also women empowerment and financial literacy. I definitely enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me. It was nice to meet you.
Thank you. And it is something that is definitely needed. As my guest said, it's an issue of balance, bringing balance. How do you make more money? Include more people in the conversation and the equation. And African women have a lot to give that can definitely help the entire continent. You're watching Business Edge. When we come back, it's all about NC4 to watch. And these are stories we're keeping our eyes on right now. We start in Angola, where the inflation rate dropped below 20% in August for the first time in more than 2 years, as consumer prices hit 19.78%. That's down from 26.09% in the same month a year ago, and the lowest level since March 2020. Nigeria's Senate Ad Hoc Committee on Oil Theft says it has begun investigations into circumstances surrounding oil theft and illegal bunkering activities in the Niger Delta region. The chairman of the committee, Bassi Akpan, said the country has lost huge earnings and failed to meet the quota allocated by OPEC. Uganda's exports to Rwanda are showing signs of rebound after 6 months of reopening the borders for trade. The Bank of Uganda records for the month of July indicates that the country exported goods worth $5.22 million to Rwanda, which is a 98.8% recovery. And finally, Kenya's Insurance Regulatory Authority is reporting that paid insurance claims jumped by 5.8% to 1.8 million in the second quarter of 2022 compared to 1.7 million claims paid during the same period of the year before. The IRA said that from the paid quarterly claims for April to June 2022, general insurance business non-liability claims were over 1.8 million compared to 1.7 million paid in the second quarter of 2021. And that's the business we have for you today. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can also download our mobile app, and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch us on the stations and platforms we are available. You can find News Central on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and more. I'm Tolulope Adeleru-Balogun. Do have a fantastic day.